Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door is notorious for the amount of glitches that it contains, from turning Bowser into a rolled-up newspaper to Flavio following you around through the entire game. And while these glitches are fun to pull off, they don't really help with a speedrun, but of the ones that do, they can be quite game-breaking. Most speedruns of Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door start off the same. You receive a letter from Princess Peach about a mystical treasure, travel to Rogueport, and meet up with your first partner, Goombella. You then defeat Lord Crump and pick up some items from the shop that are extremely important, with the most notable one being the Fright Mask, which can end certain fights immediately, which will save you from fighting an entire battle. You then head underground, scare the first Goomba fight away, unlock the Plane Curse, and reach the first skip of the run. Blooper skip at first glance looks very simple. You just jump off the edge and get respawned in the center of the room where you can take the next pipe. But how the respawns are supposed to work in this game is that Mario should respawn at the point where he entered the room from. But the reason you can respawn in the middle of the room is due to a glitch called the hazard respawn glitch. In the Thousand-Year Door, the way Mario's respawn location is determined is based on where he was last seen standing on solid ground for 2 consecutive frames. So if Mario is standing on the solid ground for only 1 frame, the game would not recognize that as a respawn point and would never update it. So by performing 2 frame-perfect jumps where Mario is not grounded for more than 1 frame, the game will never determine where Mario should respawn, and will use the default respawn location, which is the center of the room. So then just by falling or jumping into the water hazard, Mario will respawn in the center of the room, allowing you to enter the pipe, which skips most notably the Thousand-Year Door cutscene, as well as Blooper boss fight, and allows you to go straight in to Chapter 1. Once in Petal Meadows, the main goal is to avoid any encounters possible, and once reaching the first bridge, the same hazard respawn glitch that was performed for Blooper comes into play once again. By performing 2 frame-perfect jumps into the river, the respawn point next to the water will never be set, causing the default location to be in the middle. And when respawning over the water, there's a 1-frame window where Mario can jump and land on the following path. So this trick is a bit more difficult than Blooper skip, as just getting the respawn glitch to work is only half of it. But by successfully landing on the following side, the requirement to take the pipe into the background to activate the bridge can be skipped entirely. The next part of the run consists of entering Petalburg to talk to Mayor Krupp and then heading towards the Sun and Moonstone. Along the way, there are a couple of POW blocks to be collected as well as some force battles to fight, which in the speedrun every single battle has basically been solved. Unlike Pokemon, where some Pokemon counters are random and the percentages of moves can vary the results of a run, in this game every attack does the exact same thing, and every fight can play out the exact same way, with some fights having 2 or 3 potentially different outcomes. So for each fight encountered, you just have to follow the best sequence and continue along to the very next fight. After returning back to Petalburg, Koops joins the team and helps infiltrate Hooktail Castle. The first trick within Hooktail Castle is a combination of 2 skips in one. The first one is the lock jump, which is a very simple trick. Just by jumping along the Z-axis, Mario can clip up onto the lock onto the door so that he can get onto the first big block, when normally the purple activation block would need to be hit. The second section is the flip skip, which skips the need to flip the staircase in order to grab the key to the castle. And once on the ledge where the star piece is, in order to get to the key, you just have to push yourself as close to the edge as possible, jump and move slightly down and then back up so that Mario will strafe midair. He will then land on the platform directly below, and once the key is grabbed, can be used to unlock the castle door. The next section is pretty straightforward. You run to grab the paper curse, escape the trap room, equip power bounce as well as multi-bounce, grab the next castle key, and then perform a little trick called window jump, which if performed correctly will allow Mario to jump right from the platform through the window in the castle without having to reveal the platform with Koops' ability. Also, just in case you were wondering, at the beginning of the run we were introduced to Professor Frankly, and due to the blooper skip, Frankly will still be following Mario around, as the checkpoint to tell him to stop following was completely skipped, and he really shouldn't be in any of these cutscenes. But at this point, it's where you're introduced to Mrs. Mouse, and all that is left of Hooktail is to ascend to the top of the castle and face off against Hooktail himself, who, after mercilessly eating some toads in the crowd, and with the help of Frankly, is defeated, revealing Koops' father, who is trapped inside, giving you the very first Crystal Star. The next 2 sections you get to play as Peach as well as Bowser, and it basically just sets up the story, but it doesn't really require any special tricks. But once back as Mario, you talk to Merlin to get Super Goombella, which will lead to the next big tricks of the run. In order to grab the ability Double Dip quickly, Mario can shove himself into a corner outside of Frankly's house, and while sliding, can spin to open the door, placing him outside of Frankly's house, in which you can grab Double Dip from the chest and take the pipe to go underground. Similar to the blooper skip as well as bridge skip, the hazard respawn glitch can be used in the blue switch room to skip across the blocks that are blocking Mario's path. Teleporter Room Early is one of the most impactful skips in Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door, and it's an insanely precise wall clip where you have to go into paper mode and jump at an exact angle where Mario will just barely clip through this tiny opening, which will lead to the room that will teleport you straight to X-naut Fortress, which normally is something that happens at the very end of the game. Once in X-naut Fortress, you just avoid every fight possible as this area is way above Mario's current level, grab the red note as well as the card key, and then head back to the elevator at the start. There will then be a fun game show that you have to beat, grab the following card key, and then teleport back to the sewers. Jump storage is a status that Mario can enter that will allow him to gain infinite height, which can lead to him getting basically wherever he wants. But the way to enter this state is to perform any action, jump, and then get interrupted the frame after you attempt to jump. And what happens is that Mario will not actually jump, but the game will store the jump and think that he is about to. So by gaining jump storage outside of the teleporter room and heading back into Rogueport, you can super jump by running over a ledge and holding A while having jump storage, and fly all the way over to the Ultra Hammer, which normally cannot be collected at this point in the game. And after collecting the Ultra Hammer, it's on to the Great Tree. Once in the Grand Tree, which is a huge maze of different pipes and enemies that you have to go through, towards the end, there is the Jobby Hive fight, which is about to take place, and a trick called Paper Mode Pause can be performed, which is when pausing while in paper mode, releasing right bumper, and jumping on the same frame and then unpausing. It will allow Mario to jump through certain walls, and in this case, the wall surrounding the hive fight. And after walking around the perimeter, the entire fight can be skipped. Then all that is left is to grab the super boots and head towards the exit, grabbing Thunder Rage on the way out. Next up is Poshley Heights, where you read the Sanctum Note and save near the XS Express. Then after heading back to the sewers to grab jump storage yet again, you can get knocked out by the Hammer Bro outside. And the reason for this is the most consistent way to gain jump storage is back near the teleporter room, but the next objective is at Poshley Sanctum. So by getting a game over in the sewer and respawning at the save point near the express, Mario will still have jump storage even though the game reverted back to the last save. And Mario will actually be closer to the Sanctum, where we will need to use the super jump. But by super jumping up to the left in the Sanctum, you can pull the lever to unlock the pipe, which will lead to the Garnet Star. There is then another small Peach mission as well as a Bowser mission where you get to play a little 2D level, which when completed will take us to the Blimp ticket skip. After the Peach and Bowser intermissions, Mario will be departing from the XS Express, and once immediately off the train, another unspin clip or spin delay at the edge of the door can be performed. By unspinning and jumping on the exact same frame, you can clip into the crack in the door and jump right through the train, landing on the tracks. The next part of this skip is to gain jump storage with the help of Koops, which is pretty difficult to see as Mario is behind a wall, but the way to get jump storage in this situation is to shoot Koops away and start the email cutscene a few frames after, which if timed correctly will give Mario jump storage right as the cutscene ends. Then by running to the right and using the jump storage, the invisible wall surrounding the pipe can be jumped over, completely skipping the majority of Chapter 2 and saving almost 20 minutes. The next section is the Minor League, which doesn't have any skips, just to use the most optimal attacks as well as items, make it to the Armored Harrier fight, immediately run, and get Yoshi to join your team. And this is basically a scripted loss because Yoshi is the only one that can damage these opponents, so running will just end the fight quicker, and also sadly this is where Frankly is going to be no longer with us. Normally a Yoshi egg would start to follow us around, and since the game is trying to update the follower, Frankly is unfortunately removed. But the reason Yoshi is so important is because not only does Yoshi run faster than Mario, but Yoshi is also required for the most important skip in the game, which we will talk about later. After grabbing Yoshi on your team, it's time to return back to the X-naut Fortress, where after grabbing the last card key, jump storage is once again obtained. Only this time, it's from the HP drain block. Then by running all the way to the right without encountering a fight as well as without jumping that would lose jump storage, after entering the conveyor room, the wall normally blocking you can be jumped over without having to hit the block to lower it, as well as the large wall that requires you to go into the background in order to get around. Then after grabbing the next card key and navigating to the end of the room, the Magnus von Grapple fight begins. The Magnus von Grapple fight is similar to the other ones, and it's pretty straightforward, but thanks to the clip that was performed back in Rogueport, in order to get double dip, this fight can be done much quicker. And after defeating Von Grapple, you escape from X-naut Fortress, reunite with Frankly, grab jump storage yet again, and by only collecting 3 of the 7 crystals, open the 1,000-year door to advance to Chapter 8. And while being able to skip 3 full chapters in the entire run is nice, the route for a long time didn't actually save a ton of time, as many items obtained within those skipped chapters were still required to beat Chapter 8. That was until the discovery of Palace Skip. Palace Skip is the largest skip in Paper Mario The 1,000-Year Door, skipping the entirety of Chapters 4, 5, and 6, allowing for Teleporter Room Early to even be viable. By performing this trick, the Riddle Tower can be skipped, and since Bobbery and Boat Mode are only required to get to Riddle Tower, the chapters that unlock those are not required. This trick also skips a room that is the only reason Ultra Boots are required, allowing for all 3 to be skipped. The way this trick works is extremely complicated, but this is a simplified explanation. In the room right before Gloomtail, there is a loading zone underneath the floor that is normally not accessible until the completion of Riddle Tower, and in order to get into that loading zone, the following steps are required. First, something called text storage needs to be gained, and the way text storage is obtained is that there needs to be an enemy as well as an item in the same room. Then by using delayed Goombella buffer, which can be done by neutral jumping away from Goombella, causing her to not update her position, then by activating Goombella right before picking up the item, her text box will show up after picking up the item. And when picking up an item, enemies will stop moving. So by closing the item trigger, the enemy will begin to move. But since Goombella's text animation is still being displayed, the text will persist into the battle. The next step is to run away from the fight without dismissing the text box, which can be done by repeatedly pressing Z to restart the message, and once escaping the fight, text storage is obtained. And after obtaining text storage, by positioning Mario towards the back of the room and charging his hammer to 2/3 of the way and releasing to start the fight, you can swap your teammate to the front of your team, swap them to Yoshi, and then run away, all while making sure to press Z after every single input to keep the text on the screen. The reason that this is done is that so that Yoshi will spawn outside of the room. The 2/3 charge of the hammer means that Mario will have his back facing the wall, so that once the fight ends, by performing paper mode immediately, Yoshi can get stuck behind the wall. And now that Yoshi is stuck behind the wall, you can attempt the Yoshi teleport, which is just as complicated, if not more, than all the steps prior. And in order to get this to work, you have to get the Ember's attention, unspin when it gets close, and open the pause menu within 4 frames of unspinning. If you unspin and pause within 1 frame and potentially 2 frames, the Yoshi teleport can be done without a 3rd fight, but the typical skip will require a 3rd encounter with the Ember, and by unpausing and pressing X and A immediately after, you should be halfway under the floor as the encounter starts. Then by running from the fight and holding up, you should be able to hit the loading zone. And yes, that was the simple explanation. And to show you how impactful this skip actually was when it was discovered, here's the first time it was ever done by a human.
Ah, yes! Oh my god.
You can do it. Oh my god.
This is real!
But after successfully completing Palace Skip, it brings you to the end of the run. And luckily for runners of Paper Mario The 1,000-Year Door, after completing Palace Skip, the run doesn't have any difficult tricks to follow. The rest of the game is just defeating Grottus, Bowser, Shadow Peach, True Form, and lastly, Shadow Queen, which all have pretty laid out strategies that are the quickest and most optimal to follow. But once defeating the Shadow Queen, saving Peach and watching a 6-minute cutscene, the Paper Mario TTYD speedrun stops. Thanks for watching the skips that broke Paper Mario The 1,000-Year Door. If you know of a game that has some absurd skips and glitches that you'd like me to cover, just let me know in the comments down below, and subscribe if you want to see more.